Hello, Internet. There's no such thing as man-made climate change, and there never will be. I'm going to go through a couple of my reasons, and then I'm going to go through some videos I found on the internet to help prove this point. So let's jump into it. People say that cars create a lot of CO2 emissions and create global warming, but I think that's bogus. Cars are just pretty much humans that exhale all the time, and everybody has, less than one car on average globally, so that's like a couple extra billion people exhaling, so no big deal there. If you ever seen an Al Gore movie or anything that shows pollution, like you'll see those big smokestacks from different companies. I just want to say that's just a bunch of warm air, and that's why it rises. That's not affecting the climate in any negative way at all. People say nuclear silos change the environment. That's just a bunch of water vapor left over from creating power. With all that being said, let's look at some videos online. I think they're good sources and they help prove my point. So let's jump right into it. Alright, this first video I'm going to look at is entitled Glenn and the guys find proof scientists are lying about global warming, and let's see what they have to say.
Let's go for the global warming
This
update.
is so fantastic. It's a peer-reviewed, and I love how they emphasize this is a peer-reviewed study, because that's what you always hear from the global warmists.
That's what you always hear from the global warmists. Peered review. What do they know, huh?
It says almost all of the supposed warming is coming from scientists adjusting the temperatures. And we've talked about before how they go back and they adjust temperatures. Now, why are you adjusting temperatures from the 1940s?
Right.
How do you know today in 2017 what the temperature was on July 10th in 1943? You don't.
Yeah, you don't know the temperature in 1943, okay? They didn't invent thermometers back then, okay? They were just guessing. It's like, am I sweaty? Am I cold? That's what they went off of. No thermostats in the 1950s.
You don't. You don't. They probably knew then, but you don't know now.
Okay.
Yeah,
you don't know now.
And this is one of the things that...
Yeah, if anything, some guy just wrote down, it's a warm day, very unscientific, even if it is peer-reviewed.
Because I've never seen it compiled like this before. There have been, skeptics have pointed this idea out before, that what they do is not necessarily adjust the current temperatures higher to get more warming.
Although they have done some of this, according to this study, they
Yeah.
have done that too.
One of the things is they go back and they make the old temperatures colder.
Right.
So it looks like it's warmed more from back then to today.
Yeah, they go back and they just erase whatever data they have, and then they just write in it's colder that day, therefore global warming.
Now they show...
Of course, the 30s and 40s were hot. They were really warm periods, warm decades. And so now we're making them cooler. They're not as hot as they once were.
Yeah, that guy just remembers it being warmer back in the day, and it's colder today. So clear evidence of a conspiracy or lying scientists or whatever the case may be.
And the important thing here is the rate of the warming, because the rate of the warming is something that they can, it's not even how much it's warmed, it's what is the rate, so how much per decade. So they can extrapolate that to make global warming look intensely horrible if the rate is fast. If the rate is slow, it's not as big of a deal. And when they're talking about hundreds and in some cases thousands of years, it makes a big difference. But you look at the difference between the 1980 chart of temperatures and the 2015 chart of temperatures. They reproduce every single chart all against each other, and you're talking, almost all the warming is because of this.
Because of the adjustments.
Holy cow.
So there you go. Holy cow. They didn't cite anything in their description or nothing. But you'll just have to trust them that all their sources are correct and they have zero incentive to lie. So it works for me. So I think it should work for the rest of the internet too. So anyway, a comment from that video from Mark Veher, and they call this science. Just stop adjusting temperatures from the past and misleading and not very scientifically sound. It in fact is manipulating and distorting data to bring about a political agenda. Yeah, so this guy knows what he's talking about. He sees how the climate scientists actually are. They just make the past seem cooler and the future seem warmer, and then they claim global warming, and then they get all that sweet global warming money. Just ask, what's his face? Al Gore. Yeah, that's it. Alright, this next video is called Global Warming is the Biggest Fraud in History. Dan Pena. It's all in caps, so you know he has got something to say.
Dan, you got the money, okay?
I got a few, Bob, yeah.
Okay, you support Trump? You do?
Yep.
Okay.
I was one of the first endorsers, public
Okay.
endorsers of President Trump.
What are you guys going to do when our ocean level rises?
Thank you for asking that question. I have the answer.
Don't let me finish.
I have the answer.
Let me finish.
Well, thank you for the
now.
question. Yeah.
Right now.
Okay.
For the first time on Earth, we're changing the gas.
Now you're full of shit. Sit down. I'm going to answer you.
Right off the bat, you're full of shit. Sit down.
I'm going to answer you. Just shut up and sit down.
No way.
Sit down.
No, I got to finish my question.
I'm going to answer global warming.
All right, finish the question,
our
then
gas
answer.
is changing on Earth, and it's changing to CO2. What do you people with the money, what are you doing about this? Because
I'm going to tell you right now.
Children. No, I've got children. I've got 21, 23-year-old children. And what's their future with you people with money? You talk about money all of the time.
Okay. Sit down,
Okay.
please. Sit down, please.
What
In
are
the
you
front
doing
row.
about
Excuse me.
Earth?
In the front row. Please
About
sit down.
Earth.
Okay, you've asked your question. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Can you answer?
I'm going to answer.
Excuse me, ma'am. Will you please sit down?
And
Please.
Thank you.
That's okay. Please sit down. Let him answer.
okay. In 2011, my wife and I were in Antarctica, renewing our vows. For most of you that don't know, Antarctica's on a mountaintop.
Antarctica is on a mountaintop. The continent? Because it's above ocean water? Or do you mean there's a mountaintop on Antarctica?
Okay, and there is a $500 million facility, scientific facility there, and the scientists came to give us presentations about global warming. And they had cores of ice that they had drilled. They had drilled 4,000 or 5,000 cores, and they only brought 15 or 20. So they're going through the second or third core, and they said 275,000 years ago, this was the temperature, blah, 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 blah. And then 55,000 years ago, the world was 2 degrees warmer Celsius than it is today. This is 2011. And, wait, stop. And he said, and I said, well, you mean the whole world? He says, yes. And the poles are only benchmarks. And I said, well, what about the things that the young woman alluded to? Okay. And he said, it's all cyclical. And although the gas may have exacerbated it, in the cosmos of time, it's not a fart in the wind. In the cosmos of time, of the 13.8 billion years that we've been on this miserable planet, it's not a fart in the wind. And as I told Joe Rogan on his show, and he said in his infinite wisdom, and Joe, if you hear this, I thank you for the opportunity of being on your show. He said, then in 25,000 years, it's most likely not going to be a problem. Now, my direct answer to your question, if that were really true, which you believe, and let's just for a moment say that it is true, that means that the best scenario vis-a-vis global warming is about 10 feet raising water. That's the best scenario over the next 40, 50 years. That's the best scenario. The worst scenario is about 100 feet. But let's just take the 10 feet. If the water on the planet is going to rise up 10 feet, that means the southern part of the United States is gone. England is gone. Most of Europe is gone. And I can go, most of Central America is gone. Okay.
Yeah, if the oceans raise 10 feet, pretty much all the continents are going to be underwater. So if it is true, then we're all going to die, and if it's not, then we're fine. Okay, so clearly he knows what he's talking about. He's been to Antarctica, okay? Can you really point out flaws in his argument if he's been to Antarctica? A mountaintop, too.
If that's the case, let's just take Florida, for example, which is one of the fastest growing beachfront condominiums on the planet. In the prospectus, when you invest, there should be, in the footnotes, if global warming is for real, they won't put it that way, global warming happens and water rises 10 feet, this investment you made is fuck all. Not one single investment prospectus written since 2000, this century, has alluded to global warming. Not one motherfucker. If it were really true, the banks wouldn't invest. The banks wouldn't finance. Not one motherfucking condominium.
He has a great point here. So he's saying that if global warming were real, the banks just wouldn't invest in condos because they're all going to be underwater in a couple centuries, right? So the banks know everything, and they know that global warming isn't real, so they invest into condos on the beach. Flawless logic.
So the people that have the money, and I'm jealous of the Vice President, Gore, which Sally and I rode on a plane from South America with a few years ago. I am jealous he came up with a scam before I did. Because the financial institutions, the banks of this world know it's not going to happen.
Yeah, if anyone knows anything about the environment, it's the banks and the financial institutions. Gosh.
Otherwise, you couldn't get a goddamn loan in London. You know those 30, 40-year mortgages? The world will be over by then. Is Barclays Bank going to give you a motherfucking loan? With the greatest respect, ma'am, it's the greatest fraud that's been perpetrated on mankind this century.
The biggest fraud this century. Dang, those are some fighting words, you know? He wished he thought of this scam first. You know, there is so much money in lobbying for global warming because the special interest groups just protect their agenda, and you know, they're really just, you know, they want to keep this idea down of the, you know, CO2 emissions don't do anything and all this stuff. And as long as they can do that, then they get this money from climate change. Just saying climate change is a thing, they just reap the rewards, you know? Alright, so let's look at some of the comments from this video. Global warming and cooling of the planet is cyclical! Explanation point. CO2 levels were higher when the dinosaurs walked this planet. Global warming is a scam to tax you of your carbon footprint. Yeah, it's 100% a scam. There's no way that a carbon footprint has any relevance to do with global change or global warming. Zero. Got another one here by Jonathan Lip. How glorious it is to have Dan drop F-bombs against global warming, and I love that he called it global warming and not climate change. I'm a huge Dan fan. Well there, Jonathan Lip. I think you're right. In 1,000 years from now, when there's zero evidence of man-made climate change, you will be proven correct. We got another comment here from Macho. Al Gore is a scam. I'm from the Philippines. My house town is coastal. Since I was young and I'm 40 now, sea level is just the same. Yeah. Okay, so if this 40-year-old guy hasn't seen any sea level change, then there never will be. We got Islander 2112. The old saying goes, if they can find a way to tax the air, they'll do it. And that's exactly what they're doing with Al Gore. They somehow, oh, you have a big carbon footprint, therefore you need to pay more in taxes. What a ridiculous thing to say. Am I right, Islander? Alright, moving on to the next video, we got Never Mind That Heat, Climate Change is a Hoax by Gravy Train Scientists by Russia Today. So let's see what they have to say.
Russia's deadly wildfires, the smog-filled cities and poor harvest are being seen by some environmentalists as signs of climate change. Let's now cross live to London to discuss this with Piers Corbyn. He's an astrophysicist and also founder of Weather Action. Good to have you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us live there in London. So what we're seeing here is a drastic change in climate, aren't we?
Well, climate has always been changing, but this has nothing to do with man.
That's exactly what I've been saying. Climate change has nothing to do with man-made activities.
In fact, we predicted that there would be extreme heat in East Europe and Russia this summer. And it's caused by a certain circulation pattern. CO2 does not cause circulation patterns. What causes those is a combination of solar activity and the state of the phases of the moon.
Yeah, it's the phases of the moon, and they make stuff hot or cold.
But hang on, Piers, wait, excuse me, just a minute. You say this isn't caused by man. How come they're reporting this heat wave is recognised as the worst in 1,000 years of recorded history in Russia? And surely
of course,
man has got something to do with this, hasn't he?
No, nothing to do with it. The only connection is man is here at the same time as the sun and the moon are doing things.
Yeah, just nothing to do with it. Zero. All those cars, not enough to change anything. Those smokestacks, hot air, just coal, you know, that's a little bit of CO2, that's not a lot, it's like breathing really.
You see, a very similar situation happened about 132 years ago, where there was the same sun, earth, lunar, magnetic states. There was heat waves in Russia, and there were also floods in Pakistan.
Yeah, the moon was in the same cycle, the magnetic field of the earth was doing its thing. I'm sure all the planets were aligned, and you know, it was a Pisces sign that month, you know, so all these things really add up, change the environment, nothing to do with man.
As now, and in the previous few years there was also floods in the English summers, also 132 years ago. So these things are dictated by solar activity in the moon. They're nothing to do with mankind, and those who say that are just trying to make money out of it.
Yeah, so anytime you see someone saying climate change is a thing, they're just trying to scam you, alright? So just hide your wallet, hide your kids, they're coming for your money, alright? So you need to be careful that you don't get scammed by these people. You know, it's all the incentive for these climate, there's a bunch of incentive that all these people are saying there's climate change, and there's no incentive for big coal or big industry to say that there's none, alright? So just know your biases.
But are we not going to see this? Are we not going to see this again next year, the year on? I mean, it's quite recent that
that's a very interesting question. These things do come in bursts, and we're working on that very question, those forecasts. We did say there would be a series of wet summers in England, for example, which we've had. Now, will there be a series of these very hot summers in Russia? We don't know. We have to work on that. But I assure you, it's nothing to do with carbon dioxide.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with CO2. CO2 doesn't change the environment at all. And even if it did, man doesn't put out enough of it to make a difference.
And if you stop stop driving around Moscow, it won't affect next summer one jot.
Well, how come then so many climate change scientists disagree with you and they get so much support for what they say?
They're on a gravy train, for heaven's sake. There's trillions of pounds traded every year on carbon trading and doing silly things like building windmills, which will achieve nothing.
Yeah, windmills don't achieve anything, all right? It's way easier just to make electricity off of coal, all right? And, you know, windmills might change the environment too. They might change wind patterns, huh?
I mean, there's money in it, and that has corrupted science.
Yeah, it's big science. It's like Google, you know, they kind of have a monopoly. It's big science, you know, they have a monopoly on climate change, and every time someone says climate change, you know, they get 3 cents or whatever because it's copyrighted, and they make a ton of money. And you know, those poor coal industries and crude oil industries, you know, they're having this hard time, you know, they're getting taxed more because of carbon emissions and environmental standards.
But also, I'm sitting here in Moscow, and I think the longer I spend outside, I'm going to get carbon monoxide poisoning.
Eventually, it's going to be climate change poisoning, and then you get to sue the coal company or something.
That's a result of all the cars.
Indeed.
That's a result of all the cars.
Well, wait a minute. No. The carbon monoxide is coming from the peat being improperly burnt. But you see, set against this warmth, you had a very cold winter in Russia, coldest for a very long time, and right now we've got record low temperatures in the southern hemisphere, which the world state media are avoiding reporting.
They had a cold winter not too long ago in Russia. Okay, what are you going to say, scientists, that you need to take the average temperature or something? No. One cold winter disproves all of climate science and debunks climate change, all right?
The average temperatures of the world are actually declining. The significant thing about the world now is not the heat in the north, although it's very significant for you, or the cold in the south so much. It's the contrast. We've got massive contrast around the world.
Yeah, major contrast in the world. It's hot in Texas and it's cold in the Antarctic, okay? So it's not climate change, it's just where you are in the world.
And these are controlled by solar lunar effects.
But a lot of people, though.
Yeah, if it's a warm day out, then the sun's, you know, putting out some extra BTUs or whatever. If it's a cold day, then the sun is shy and it's not putting out as much solar radiation or whatever.
Piers, just quickly, and Russia has an interest in the Arctic, of course. The Arctic is opening up. That's surely because of reduction in temperatures, and that's going to be perhaps exploited for all its resources.
Temperatures change, but they're not caused by CO2. Actually, ice is starting to increase again in the Arctic.
Yeah, ice is increasing in the Antarctic, all right? He doesn't cite it, but he doesn't need to, okay? He has zero bias, and he's just telling it like it is, with no citations.
And it has been increasing for a long time in the Antarctic. Again, it's nothing to do with CO2. Those who say that have no evidence for it. There's only evidence against.
Yeah, CO2 has zero effect on the climate. Anyone who says it does is getting paid by big science to somehow prove climate change.
Can I quickly ask you...
a gravy train.
Okay, can I quickly ask you, before we finish, does a very hot summer necessarily lead to a very cold winter? Can we expect a very harsh winter here in Russia?
Well, we don't know. We're working on that. They often do come in pairs like that, that is true, but not all the time. And then there are going to be changes in patterns. So, again, we have to forecast that using our long-range process of... using sun, solar magnetic and lunar effects.
I cannot highlight lunar effects on the climate, all right? If there's full moon, expect a hot summer. If it's a waning moon, expect a warm winter. If it's a waxing moon, expect a lukewarm fall. If it's a new moon, expect climate change hoaxes.
And we can predict things many months ahead, and we have been very successful in doing so.
Piers Corbin, as always, it's always very interesting to hear what you have to say. Thanks very much for joining us here.
Thank you.
Live on RT there in London, founder of Weather Action. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
All right, let's read a couple comments from that video. Someone, quick, this scientist is talking science, not politics. How did he sneak past the censor? Haha. So clearly he's just, he's being sarcastic about the censor part, but he's probably being honest about the scientist talking science. You know, those lunar effects, such a huge deal to climate science. I don't think most climate scientists take in the lunar effects. Major difference. Also, what sign is in the, you know, what if it's like Pisces or Cancer, you know, you can expect Cancer to be warmer, Pisces a little colder, you know, you gotta take in those into account too. I'm old enough to remember these Fockers proclaiming global freezing, then global warming, then more hurricanes after Katrina, world famine by 1999, ice caps melting by 2010 and flooding the world. None of that happened. None of that happened. So they went go climate change as if climate is not supposed to change. The ice caps on Mars are melting. Has Marvin not started recycling and driving electric rovers? Follow the money. People are becoming millionaires using this scheme. Suckers. Yeah, it's all about those lunar. It's all about the lunar effect on the climate, and all these climate scientists saying there's climate change and there's going to be flooding and all this stuff. They're just hoaxing you. Just remember, every time someone says climate change, they get 3 cents or whatever because it's a copyrighted term. I don't have any citations like the rest of these people, but I don't need them. I can just assert things without evidence, and people will believe me. All right, we got Rick Robinson. This guy in London is spot on. I respect him answering honestly. I'm sure it was as honest as he could answer, Robinson. All right, nuke money. My science teacher today was telling me the global warming was real. I said no, and she said to me that anyone that does not believe in global warming is uneducated, so I guess I'm dumb. All right, I don't think that, because clearly the guy in this video, he had a suit on. How could you be uneducated in a suit? Okay, so clearly he knows what he's talking about, and he's spot on, as that other guy said. Pollution is a separate issue to climate change. Yeah. Totally agree. Any climate change that's caused by pollution is a different issue than climate change made by the animals or I don't know, other stuff. Alright, I think this does it for this episode. I think I did a pretty good job at disproving man-made climate change. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Like, dislike, whatever floats your boat at whatever time period this is. I hope you're happy today, and if not, change something in your life to make it a better day. Do you think in 1,000 years from now they'll still know what sarcasm is?